Let's pull back the curtain and talk about something we rarely say out loud, even to our closest friends. We talk about wanting deep connection, soul-bearing intimacy, a partner who truly knows us. Yet when the moment comes to peel back that final layer, we freeze. Why is that? Have you ever found yourself in a relationship, sitting across from a man you care about? A torrent of unspoken thoughts and feelings swirling inside you. A part of you screams, just tell him. Tell him you're scared. Tell him about that thing from your past that still stings. Tell him you're not as perfect or put together as you look. But another voice, colder and more commanding, whispers, don't you dare. It's too much. It's too messy. He'll run. And so, you swallow the words, offer a tight smile, and change the subject. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. In my practice, I see this paradox every day. Women who are leaders in their fields, pillars of their families, and forces of nature in their own right, who become paralyzed by the prospect of emotional nakedness with a romantic partner. This fear of vulnerability isn't a personal failing. It's a complex tapestry woven from our biology, our personal histories, and the silent gendered rules that govern our lives. To understand this fear, we have to unravel it, thread by painful thread. Let's start with the basics. The fear of being vulnerable is, at its core, the fear of rejection. It's a profoundly human experience that transcends gender. Our desire to connect and belong is baked into our DNA. From an evolutionary standpoint, being accepted by the tribe meant survival. Being cast out meant death. So, it's no surprise that modern neuroscience tells us that the brain processes the pain of rejection in the same regions as it processes physical pain. That gut punch you feel when a friend ignores your text or a partner seems distant. It's not just in your head. Your brain is registering it as a genuine threat, a deep and primal wound. So when we consider opening up about our deepest insecurities, we're not just risking a little embarrassment. We are, on a subconscious level, risking a pain that feels as real as a broken bone. This is the universal entry fee for intimacy, and it's steep for everyone. But for women, this universal fear is amplified and complicated by a lifetime of social conditioning. Researcher and author Brené Brown, who has spent decades studying shame and vulnerability, has illuminated how these experiences are organized by gender. From a young age, girls receive a very specific, often unspoken rulebook on how to be an acceptable woman. What are the rules? A study from Boston College asked women this very question, and the answers were painfully consistent. Be nice, be thin, be modest, and use all available resources for your appearance. Think about that script for a moment. Nice means being pleasant, agreeable, and not making a fuss. Modest means not taking up too much space, not being too loud, and certainly not burdening others with your messy emotions. And the intense focus on appearance implies a need to present a flawless, curated exterior at all times. Now, how does vulnerability fit into that picture? It doesn't. Vulnerability is the antithesis of this script. Being vulnerable means admitting you're not always nice and agreeable. It's admitting you're struggling, you're scared, you have needs. It's revealing the cracks in the perfect facade. For a woman, being vulnerable can feel like breaking a lifelong contract she never consciously signed, risking the label of too much, too emotional, a drama queen, or high maintenance. These aren't just insults. They are sentences of social exile, judgments that we have failed at the fundamental task of being an acceptable woman. This fear is not just about a man's potential reaction. It's deeply rooted in our own internalized shame. When a woman has spent her life being told, directly or indirectly, that her worth lies in her pleasantness and perfection, revealing her imperfections can trigger profound feelings of worthlessness and self-condemnation. It feels like we are not just sharing a feeling, but revealing a fundamental flaw in our very being. Now, let's bring men into this picture because this is a dance that takes two. While women are handed the be nice and perfect rulebook, men are given one, starkly simple, and brutal rule: do not be perceived as weak. This single mandate, often referred to as toxic masculinity, isn't about condemning men, but about recognizing the restrictive and harmful cultural script they are pressured to follow. It demands emotional control, dominance, and a relentless pursuit of status. It's the big boys don't cry mantra scaled up to a lifelong performance. Herein lies the central tragedy and the source of so much of women's fear. For a woman to be vulnerable, she needs to feel she is in a safe space. She needs her partner to be a steady, compassionate container for her emotions. But what happens when that container is terrified of leaking? A woman's vulnerability inherently asks her male partner to be strong, to be the rock. But his entire social conditioning has taught him that engaging with intense emotion, hers or his own, is a sign of weakness. This creates a terrifying double bind for women. We wonder, if I break down, will he be able to handle it? Or will my raw emotion trigger his own deep-seated fear of weakness? Many women have had the painful experience of opening up to a man, only to be met with a response that is anything but safe. He might shut down emotionally, becoming cold and distant. He might get angry, turning the tables and blaming her for being too emotional. He might try to fix the problem, offering solutions instead of empathy, because action feels safer than feeling. Or, in the most painful scenarios, he might show outright disgust or lose respect, seeing her vulnerability not as a courageous act of trust, but as a failure of strength. This is a recurring story you'll find whispered in comment sections and forums across the internet. Women who say they want a man to be vulnerable, who are then repulsed when he actually is. And men who, after being burned, vow never to open up again. Women see this. We feel this. We know that when we ask a man to hold our vulnerability, we are asking him to defy his own conditioning. And that is an enormous risk. It's like asking someone to catch you when you fall, knowing they've been taught their whole life that catching things is a sign of failure. Will he be the exception? We hope so, but that hope is tinged with a deep and often justified fear. This dynamic is further complicated by our personal relationship blueprints, what psychologists call our attachment styles. These styles are essentially working models formed in childhood based on our interactions with our caregivers. They are the unconscious maps we use to navigate intimacy in our adult lives. If you were lucky enough to grow up with caregivers who were consistently warm, available, and responsive to your needs, you likely developed a secure attachment style. For you, vulnerability feels more natural. You see it as a key to connection and trust that your partner will respond with care, because that's what your early life map showed you. You feel comfortable with both intimacy and independence. But many of us weren't so lucky. If your caregivers were inconsistent, sometimes available, sometimes not, you might have an anxious, preoccupied attachment style. You crave deep emotional intimacy, but are constantly worried that your partner doesn't value you as much as you value them. For you, vulnerability feels like a high-stakes gamble. You share your feelings in the desperate hope of pulling your partner closer, but you're simultaneously terrified that your needs will be too much and will drive them away. You live with a persistent anxiety that only seems to recede when you are in direct contact with your partner. And this makes opening up feel both necessary and incredibly dangerous. If your caregivers were distant, rejecting or dismissive of your needs, you may have developed a dismissive avoidance style. You pride yourself on your independence and self-sufficiency. You might even see close relationships as relatively unimportant. For you, vulnerability feels threatening and unnecessary. It represents a neediness that you've learned to suppress. You hide your feelings and deal with rejection by creating even more distance, protecting an inner world that you believe no one else can or should enter. And then there is the most complex style, often born from trauma, loss, or abuse, the fearful avoidant attachment style. You desperately want an emotionally close relationship, but you find it incredibly difficult to trust others or depend on them. You have a deep-seated belief that you are unworthy of love, and that if you get too close to someone, you will inevitably be hurt. For you, vulnerability is a paralyzing paradox. You want to open up to build the intimacy you crave, but you are utterly convinced that doing so will lead to the very pain you're trying to avoid. It's a constant soul-crushing push and pull between the desire for connection and the terror of it. These attachment patterns, these working models, are not just theories. They are active scripts running in the background of our minds. They are relational schemas that whisper if-then statements. If I tell him how I really feel, then he will reject me. If I show him I need him, then he will see me as weak and leave. For those with insecure attachment styles, the mental map to vulnerability is littered with warnings and dead ends, learned from the painful journeys of the past. The author of the blog, Decide to Commit, shared a personal story that perfectly illustrates this. After a traumatic relationship involving emotional abuse and sexual assault, she found that meeting a new, kind man triggered an immediate fight-or-flight response. Her mind raced with questions. Would I know the warning signs if this got toxic? Is he just going to use me? Would he see my trauma as too much? Her nervous system, rewired by past trauma, perceived the potential for intimacy not as a promise of connection, but as a threat of repeated pain. Her past became a ghost haunting her present, making vulnerability feel less like an emotional risk and more like a gamble with her very safety. This brings us to the deepest, most primal source of women's fear of vulnerability, the shadow of trauma. Adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, things like emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, neglect, or growing up in a household with substance abuse, mental illness, or violence, have a devastating and lifelong impact. Studies show that the more ACEs a person has, the higher their risk for a host of physical and mental health problems in adulthood, from heart disease and cancer to depression and PTSD. What is crucial to understand is that trauma isn't just a bad memory. As Dr. Bessel van der Kolk explains in his seminal book, The Body Keeps the Score, trauma physically changes the brain and the nervous system. It recalibrates your internal alarm system to be on high alert, constantly scanning the environment for threats. For a woman who has experienced trauma, especially at the hands of others, the world becomes an unsafe place. Trust does not come easily. Now imagine this woman in a relationship. Her partner, with the best of intentions, raises his voice slightly in a disagreement. For someone without a trauma history, this might be a minor, uncomfortable moment. For her, that raised voice can trigger a full-blown trauma response. Her amygdala, the brain's smoke detector, starts blaring. Her body is flooded with stress hormones. She is no longer in a conversation with her partner. She is, on a physiological level, back in the original moment of danger, preparing to fight, flee, or freeze. In this state, how is she supposed to be vulnerable? How can she open her heart when her body is screaming at her to build a fortress? For a trauma survivor, being vulnerable can feel like willingly walking into a lion's den. It's not an irrational fear. It's a deeply ingrained survival response. Her fear isn't just about being hurt emotionally. It's about a terror of being powerless, of being controlled, of being annihilated. Sharing her story, her pain, and her needs requires a level of safety and trust that can take years to build if it can be built at all. The very act of revealing the trauma risks re-traumatization if it is not met with the utmost care, empathy, and patience, and the societal context matters immensely. Consider the powerful stories of the 15 women who participated in a pageant for those with HIV in Vietnam. Their journey to step into the light was a long and agonizing one. Their fear was not just of the disease itself, but of the shame, stigma, and rejection from their families and communities. When they finally revealed their status, they were risking everything. This is a profound metaphor for any deep vulnerability. For many women, revealing a past trauma, a mental health struggle, or a deep insecurity feels like revealing a status that could cause them to be seen as damaged, broken, or unworthy of love. The fear of being abandoned for who you truly are is a potent, paralyzing force. There's another more subtle paradox at play, which we can call the paradox of intimacy. Oddly enough, research and experience show us that we are often more aggressive, critical, and emotionally careless with the people we love the most. Why? Because on some level, we feel emotionally safe with them. We believe, or at least hope, that they will stick around and forgive us no matter what. We rely, as the Vietnamese say, relying on their patience and understanding. This dynamic creates a specific fear for women contemplating vulnerability. She knows this pattern exists because she's likely seen it in her own family or even participated in it herself. She might have a stressful day at work and come home and snap at her partner over something trivial. This is a common psychological mechanism called displacement, where we unload stress from one area of our lives onto a safer target. So when she considers being vulnerable, a new fear emerges. If I show him this raw, wounded part of myself, will I simply become the safe target for all of his displaced stress and frustration? She worries that her moment of tender honesty might not be met with comfort, but with his own bottled-up anger from his bad day at work, now given a convenient target. Will her vulnerability be an invitation for connection? Or will it just open the door for her to be hurt by someone who feels a little too comfortable with her? This fear that intimacy itself can curdle into a form of casual cruelty makes a woman pause. It makes her question whether the security of a long-term relationship is truly safe enough for her most fragile self. Given this daunting landscape of biological responses, gendered scripts, attachment wounds, and past traumas, is it any wonder that women are afraid to be vulnerable? The fear is not only logical, It's a wise and protective response to a world that has often given them every reason to be afraid. So, where do we go from here? How do we build that bridge across the chasm of fear to the intimacy we all crave? It is not about conquering fear, but about learning to walk with it. It's a journey that requires courage from the woman and the creation of a truly safe harbor by her partner. For the woman who is afraid, the journey begins inward. It starts with self-awareness. Before you can share your feelings, you have to know what they are. Taking time to reflect, perhaps through journaling or quiet contemplation, allows you to identify your emotions and what triggers them. It's about learning to sit with your own discomfort without immediately trying to push it away. Then, start small. You don't have to unveil your deepest trauma on the third date. Vulnerability is built incrementally. Start by sharing about your day, a minor frustration at work, or a small joy. See how he responds. Does he listen? Does he show empathy? Or does he dismiss it, change the subject, or try to one-up you? These small moments are data points. They help you gauge whether the space is safe enough for a slightly bigger risk next time. This process, one tiny step at a time, builds the foundation of trust. And as many women in online forums and support groups attest, sometimes it takes finding the right person. Someone whose consistent patience, validation, and unconditional love makes the risk feel manageable. But it's also crucial to remember that you are the one taking the brave steps. You are the one conquering your fear. And finding a supportive partner is the environment that makes your bravery easier, not the source of the bravery itself. And for many, the support of a therapist is indispensable in providing the tools and the safe space to practice this new way of being. For the partner who wants to create that safety, your role is paramount. It begins with becoming an exceptional listener. This isn't just about hearing words. It's about listening for the feelings beneath them. When she shares something, your job is not to fix it, judge it, or offer advice, unless she explicitly asks. Your job is to listen, to show genuine interest, and to validate her feelings. Simple phrases like, "That sounds really hard," or "I can understand why you would feel that way," are incredibly powerful. They communicate that you hear her, you see her, and that her emotional reality is valid, even if you don't fully comprehend it. Create a non-judgmental space. This means actively avoiding criticism or negative reactions when she opens up. If she shares a past mistake and you react with judgment, or a fear and you react with dismissal, you have just slammed the door on future vulnerability. Remember that trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild. Her past experiences, her fears, and even her ugly emotions are part of her story. Your role is to be a trusted reader, not a critical editor. Finally, be reliable and consistent. Trust is built on a history of kept promises and dependable behavior. If you say you'll be there at 5 or be there at 5, or if you promise to support her, show up and do it. This consistency creates a sense of stability and safety that is the very bedrock upon which she can risk being vulnerable. It shows her, through actions rather than just words, that you are a safe harbor. Ultimately, emotional intimacy is what therapist Joanne Barry beautifully describes as allowing someone else to hold your heart for a while, and you theirs. It's a reciprocal act of profound trust. It doesn't work if only one person is doing it. The fear a woman feels about being vulnerable with a man is not a simple phobia to be overcome. It is a complex, historically rooted, and deeply personal response to a world that has taught her to be wary. It's the echo of every past hurt, the weight of every societal expectation, and the biological imperative to protect herself from pain. But within that fear also lies the seed of the very thing she desires most, a connection so real and so deep that she can finally lay down her armor and be seen, fully and completely, for who she truly is. That journey is not easy, but for the profound reward of authentic love, it is a risk worth taking, one small, brave step at a time.